I imagine the transition to miniature games, whether or not you're from the miniature painting hobby, maybe solely you were a painter, maybe you're from the board game side, maybe you came in from the RPG side of the hobby, or maybe you're just walking into a store for the first time and you saw some painted miniatures and you saw people pushing them around a board with tape measures and rolling dice and all that, and you thought that was really exciting. Well, I can imagine that it can be very intimidating to walk into that world, depending on where you're from, right? It's a very expensive hobby. It's very time-consuming. You need to buy a lot of kit for building and painting your miniatures. Then you need to spend, for the typical, we'll call it the typical wargaming experience, it can be several $100s, to be honest, if you're going to build an army or something like that. And then it's going to take you, dozens and dozens of hours just to paint some of the miniatures. You're probably not even going to get many of them finished by the time you're going to try out your first game. And when you're not painting your miniatures, now you're trying to learn the rules. So you're reading these giant, long rule books and trying to figure out everything, and you're reading the lore. And then, beyond that, once you just learn the basics of the rules, now you got to figure out everybody's army. You got to figure out unit composition, weapon choices, options galore. You got to figure out how to arm your leaders and how to equip your vehicles. And then finally, you get all that figured out. You go back, you spend more money, you build more things, you try to paint everything that you see in the internet and make it look as awesome as you've seen everybody else do it. And, if you're a painter, if you came from the hobby side, now you're suddenly having to learn how to batch paint, and maybe you're losing some of that connection with your individual characters and your models. You just want to paint the leaders. Everybody else is just sort of this mindless, faceless, albeit absolutely awesome model, but you're going to have to paint that several dozen times to affect an army. And you get all that ready. You put it on the board for the first time. You're in a crowd of people. Everybody knows this game way better than you. They've been playing for a long time. Maybe they're not there to help you. Maybe they just want to win the game. And suddenly you're barely getting to know your own army. You figure out that, and then they throw this other army at you, which happens to be, just a coincidence, might actually be the exact counter to your army. So, crushed and defeated and walking away, maybe that was your first, possibly your last, foray into the miniature gaming world. Now, I may sound like I'm being hyperbolic to those of you who have been in the hobby for a number of years and are deeply entrenched, as I am, in the hobby. We'll just call it a lifestyle for us. But am I? I mean, how many people walked away from the experience because that was the experience? We'll never know. We are entrenched in this. We are made of this this lifestyle. But what if I were to tell those people that there's a different experience you could have, right? That you could buy a game that was actually pretty cheap to get into, and if you bought this box for, I don't know, $50 or so, that you would get 2 complete forces. You get your board, you get all the pieces you need, you'd get your dice, and you're good to go. The pieces themselves, they're single-piece plastic models, and every single one of them is a character. And if you don't like the plastic, maybe the plastic isn't up to snuff, well, you could buy the metal version. You could buy the collector's version, which comes with metal models in addition to the plastic ones, which is kind of the best of both worlds, because then you have a set that you could play on the board while you're meticulously building and painting these highly detailed models. In addition to that, you don't really need to know about an army at first, because there is no faction. You can just buy whatever you like. The rule of cool really applies here. You could just buy whatever looks cool and whatever you actually want to build and paint. And because you only have to put 4 pieces down, you can really spend your time getting to know these wonderfully detailed models, getting to paint them and understand everything about their character. Maybe the setting isn't so grimdark and just blank and faceless, mindless killing. Maybe there's a lot of flair in this world. Maybe there's actually, diversity in terms of the types of colors and creeds and species and everything that you play. And not everything is just so dark and mean and muscular. Maybe there's a lot of graceful pieces, a lot of wonderfully arcane pieces. And when you get bored of those pieces, there are alternate pieces. You can collect as many or as few as you like. You could just keep going and paint as you go, put them on the board and enjoy them. And maybe the gaming experience is a lot more like a board game. And the board game mechanics are a lot more, I guess, feasible for you to understand. They're a lot more accessible. You understand how to move a space. You understand where to put a token. You don't have to measure everything out. And the board itself is small enough to where you can just carry it with you on the go, including the few number of models that you actually need to play the game. You could play it in your favorite bar if you wanted to. And the best part is everything is so self-contained. You have the rules for your model are printed on a card, and it's on the single side of the card. And the card itself is color-coded and symbolized so that you could actually understand it in several different languages. And as it turns out, this game is actually printed in several different languages, so you could play it internationally. So literally everything about this game is built for a realistic lifestyle. Maybe you only get to get out and play it once a month, but you don't need to sit down and study for years on end. You don't have to understand everybody else's faction. I mean, definitely would help to know a bunch of the models, but you're collecting those anyways. You're enjoying them, and you could field those models yourself. So what is this game, and what is this game experience? You could be playing this right now. Maybe that could be your very first miniature gaming experience. And if you ask me, I think it should be. So the game that I'm talking about is a game by Corvus Belli, and it's called Aristeia. And Aristeia is basically everything I just explained. It's a board game, MOBA-style miniature game where you can collect whatever pieces you want. You put your 4 pieces down against the other guy's 4 pieces. You play a scenario. You play to win. And it's fun. It's casual. And it really does zero in on getting you in the action, whether that be painting or whether that be getting in and playing a very fun game with your friends. And you could do this very quickly, at a low cost, very convenient, and you can play several sessions a night. So that's why I think this is a fantastic game, and it's definitely worth a look. So, like I said, Aristeia is a MOBA-style board game set in the Infinity universe, which is not the grim darkness of the far future. It's actually the optimistic, maybe corporatized version of the very near future, where mankind has conquered the stars. It's a rich and wonderfully entertaining sci-fi setting from the Infinity folks over at Corvus Belli, and there's some good crossover with that game as well. It's just a wonderful little board game that seems to tick all the boxes for anybody who might be interested in really getting into the miniature gaming hobby, or maybe just looking for that little bit of an extra experience over their board game experience, maybe supplemental tactical game to their RPG, or maybe you're already a miniature gamer and you want to play something that's smaller scale versus the large war game that you typically play. Aristeia ticks a lot of those boxes, and it fits in this wonderfully excellent spot. And I really do think that if somebody were to begin their miniature gaming experience, this is where I would start them, just because the experience from beginning to end is going to be more satisfying, in my opinion. It's going to fit a lifestyle that isn't completely dedicated to the miniature gaming hobby. But that said, there still are some issues with Aristeia. It's absolutely not a perfect game. We already talked about all the things that are actually conveniently wonderful about the game. But here's some things that maybe some folks may not like about the game. Aristeia uses a color-coded dice system, special dice, and there's a lot of face-to-face rolling in Aristeia. And sometimes that dice rolling can lead to a very swingy experience, meaning there's a lot of highs and lows. Sometimes games, may feel very swingy, especially if you're on the losing end of that dice rolling. And the mechanics for heading to the infirmary and coming back into the board can get a little punishing over time, especially if your team is getting beat over and over again. So that can be a little bit punishing. And that swinging mechanic, it's kind of a double-edged sword. What I like about it is it encourages casual play. It means that, a novice player still has somewhat of a shot at beating an experienced player, but obviously the experienced player is going to do a lot better. You also have, if you're only going to stick with the core box, my main complaint about the core box is that the scenarios enclosed in the core box feel very repetitive and very similar. So while it could be fun for the first few times that you play, I would recommend going to the internet and looking for those other scenarios, especially Capture the Flag, and there's one that's a lot like football. Those make those scenarios a lot more interesting as well. So the game isn't perfect. If you're going to stick with, if you're a hobby or a painting connoisseur like I am, and you insist on fielding metal miniatures and you really want to play the nice pieces, it can be a little annoying to have to go and buy the plastic kits just to get the cards that you need to play the characters that you want. That's a little annoying for me because I don't really want to paint the plastic pieces, and I really prefer the metal pieces. So just a couple of cons on the game, and something to think about. And finally, just to answer the question, well, geez, if this game is as good as you say it is, and it ticks all the boxes you say it does, well, why isn't it your favorite game? Well, full disclosure, it's not my favorite game, mainly because I'm hardcore, man. I play a lot of miniature games, and I love a lot of miniature games for different reasons. I like the more intense games. I like the tighter competitive system of Guild Ball. I love the thematic systems of Malifaux and how intricate those interactions can be. And I love playing the Batman miniatures game because that's just got a great IP and a fantastic theme. Aristeia may not be my favorite miniature game, but it's the one that I'm going to keep with me probably long after these other games may have hit the sunset for me. It just fills all those spots. And again, it's just such a great intro game, and it's got the staying power for I can play it with anybody of any skill level and really enjoy the game that way. So what we want to do here is I want to give you a formal introduction to Aristeia, maybe teach you how to play it. If you're watching this channel, there's actually a couple of painting videos on here and a couple of match reports on here as well that you may want to check out. But I really do think that this game is worth a look. And if I had my druthers, this would be the game that I hand to somebody who is outside of the miniature gaming world, looking to get into the miniature gaming world and find out what it's about, because I really do feel that overall, it's one of the best experiences a new person can have, whether or not they're coming from the RPG world, the board gaming world, any of the other, maybe even the video game world, or maybe not a gamer altogether. This is a system I would recommend. This game is absolutely fantastic, and if you are a local to me in the Southern California area, consider this my formal invitation for you to come and experience this game with me. I would be more than happy to show you how to play it, how to collect it, how to paint it, and geez, let's explore this game together and let's play it because it's just great. It's very fast to play. Once you get the mechanics, which are a lot like just your basic board game mechanics for the most part, you'll understand that. Probably the most difficult thing to understand is switches and face-to-face rolls. But once you get that, that's going to be very quick and simple. And I think you're going to really get into the characters. I already have my favorites in the game. And really, the rule of cool is just such a big thing for me. A lot of times I build my teams just based on the miniatures that I like the look of. And guess what? I can still do pretty well with those pieces. So anyways, this is my intro to Aristeia. I hope you guys stick around for the rest of this video series, and I invite you to play. So thanks for watching, and we will catch you on the next one.